Today, I will be examining the two different leadership styles presented in the movie The Two Popes. The movie sets the scene with Jorge Bergoglio and his start at life. We see his background and how he ended up being involved in the Catholic Church. We then fast forward into the decision for a new pope after Pope John Paul II passes, with a close-up of how the selection for the pope is done. During the voting, we see Jorge Bergoglio and Joseph Ratzinger as the two large selections. Ratzinger was eventually chosen and he became Pope Benedict XVI. This sets the scene for the future of the Catholic Church. Into the 21st century, we have these two main characters brought together again when Bergoglio wants to retire from his role in the Church. Pope Benedict refuses to sign his papers as this is something he does not see as an option. They go back and forth together and we see their extreme differences in leadership and views. During this time, we also see the large scandals in the Church break. Pope Benedict's assistant is arrested for sexual misconduct and we see the Catholic Church take a major toll. Over the next few days, Bergoglio tries to continue to convince the Pope to allow him to retire. Over many conversations and many confessions being made, Pope Benedict decides to resign from the papacy. A new selection for the Pope occurs, and Bergoglio, or Pope Francis, is chosen as the next Pope. When we evaluate the film and the two leaders, we see extreme differences in leadership styles. Starting off with Pope Benedict XVI, we see, in the trade approach, impoverished management. Towards the end of the movie, we see Pope Benedict for the first time being face-to-face and involved with his followers in the chapel. As stated in Nordhaus 2019, the leader is often having little contact with followers, which up until the end of his papacy, we see he really tended to keep to himself and seldom had dinner with other people. Moving into the situational approach, we see Pope Benedict use more of the directing style approach, also known as S1 in his leadership. Nordhaus 2019 describes this as spends a smaller amount of time using supportive behaviors. We see his leadership as just someone who sits in the chair, but doesn't seem to have many personal close connections with his staff or his fellow cardinals. Lastly, we see Pope Benedict lead with management by exception, which is explained in Nordhaus as intervenes only after standards have not been met or problems have arisen, which is seen very largely in the scandal within the Catholic Church. He admits to Bergoglio, when he is confessing his sins, he had a priest that he knew was engaging in these behaviors, but did not do anything about it or confess to another person until the scandal broke to the public. While it's not completely clear whether he confessed these to the public, he had never told another person until he felt as though he needed to say something with the current scandal and the position that he was. In comparison, we see Pope Francis as quite the opposite. We see team management in the trade approach, which is described as emphasis on both tasks and interpersonal relationships. After he is chosen as the Pope, we see him out in the community cooking and enjoying time with others. Rather than staying inside his home, he was out and meeting his followers and community. Within the situational approach, we see Pope Francis take a very coaching approach to leadership, or S2, which Nordhaus 2019 describes as requires that the leader involve himself or herself with followers by giving encouragement and soliciting follower input. When he first arrives at the Vatican, we see him get distracted talking to the groundspeople very early on. He listens to what they have to say and is very involved from the start in his gardening and making connections to his life. Throughout the movie, we see Pope Francis joke around and take a very friendly approach to his leadership. He is able to communicate well and encourage others around him. Lastly, in Pope Francis's leadership, we see him engage in the transformational leadership approach, which is explained by Nordhaus as they listen to followers and are not intolerant of opposing viewpoints. In the very beginning of the movie, we see Pope Benedict argue and belittle Pope Francis for his viewpoints on homosexuality and marriage. Pope Francis explains that they need to preach love and love all people regardless of sins. He shows us repeatedly in the movie that he is accepting of others despite the sins that they have had throughout their lifetime. Some influential scenes in the movie that really accentuate their leadership Cynic explains our why is fully formed in our late teens. At the very start of the movie, we see Bergoglio in his early years. We see his background in the church, and this was the very start of his why and his future. He helped repair a church at a very young age and showed his why very early on. What is bothering us about another is their strength. From Cynic, 2017. We see this in the movie when Pope Benedict and Bergoglio are talking about retirement, and Pope Benedict explains how he had thought about resigning, but didn't get a sign from God until Bergoglio had shown up. He had thought to himself that he wouldn't resign because he didn't want Bergoglio to take his place as Pope. He saw Bergoglio showing up and trying to retire as a sign that he should resign, and God was pointing him in this direction. What Pope Benedict failed to realize was that the reason he thought this was because he was very opposite in his leadership and viewpoints. It bothered him the way that he led and his openness to sinners. This openness was a huge strength of Bergoglio in the end. In the skills approach and environmental influences, we see how Pope Benedict XVI is affected by these outside influences, and they affect his leadership and inevitably lead him to resign. Nordhaus explains how external environmental influences, including economic, political, and social issues, as well as natural disasters, can provide unique challenges to leaders. This challenge was too much for Pope Benedict to handle. He saw the damage that was done in the church during his time, and one of his most influential lines in the movie was him explaining to Pope Francis the damage that he had done in the Catholic Church. Pope Francis was trying to explain the damage he would do resigning, since a pope hadn't resigned in over 600 years, but Pope Benedict responded with, "And what damage will be done if I remain?" In transformational leadership, we see examples of idealized influence and Pope Francis's influence on others. At the end of the movie, they take his life full circle and show him again outside with the community. He was involved in showing them what he is all about. He really exemplifies what Nordhaus describes as, they are deeply respected by followers, who usually place a great deal of trust in them. He was very respected by many, which is why he was able to win the papacy by such a landslide. We also see transformational leadership in Pope Francis, as he is the star in the movie when he first is asked to be able to retire. He shows that he is aware of the norms that the Catholic Church has upheld in regards to homosexuality, and Pope Francis makes it very clear that he does not agree with these. He will not allow the hatred that exists between others and believes that we should welcome sinners with even greater open arms. He holds strong on these values and shows that these ideals, while not considered normal, he will stick to his beliefs. In authentic leadership, we focus on 4 traits. One of them being critical life events. As we looked back on Pope Francis's life, he was going to get married. He was looking for a sign for what God wanted him to do. He wasn't sure if he wanted to join the Jesuits or if he should follow the woman he loved. He believed in God, and God gave him a sign to join the Jesuits, and he left everything he knew behind. This critical life event shaped everything he did as a leader. It led him eventually to being Pope. We see a lot of issues with Pope Benedict's leadership that ultimately led him to resign. He was stuck in the Church's old ways. He wasn't willing to change with the times and still had a very static mindset. Bergoglio explained to him that time demands movement and change, but the Church was narcissistic and he refused to. Pope Benedict also wasn't engaging with others. He didn't eat dinner with others, and he didn't engage with the day-to-day workers. However, Pope Francis did. We see him often engaging with his followers and with his staff. When Bergoglio immediately started making friends, one of the first things Pope Benedict said to him was, "Popularity, is there a trick to it?" When all Bergoglio did was be nice and kind to others. In conclusion, overall, we do see very large differences in leadership in the movie The Two Popes. We see a lot of different leadership styles, techniques, and relationships between Pope Benedict and Pope Francis. Pope Benedict was static in his leadership. He tended to stay to himself, and he wasn't open to change. Whereas Pope Francis was open to new ideas, he was friendly with the community and the staff, and he was very involved with day-to-day function. Cynic and Nordhaus explain why and how these techniques create different environments and a means for change. This movie shows us what we should be in a leader and how our early formed why can really shape who we are. Thank you.